What happens when a rich first-class passenger publicly humiliates a quiet man on a plane, only to discover that man is Keanu Reeves? No shouting. No arguments. Just one calm announcement from the pilot. And suddenly, the entire cabin freezes in shock. This isn't just a story about embarrassment. It's a lesson about real class you'll never forget. No one in first class expected drama that morning, but it arrived faster than turbulence. The cabin felt peaceful and expensive. Soft music played through hidden speakers, glasses gently clinked as flight attendants served drinks, and passengers relaxed into wide leather seats, enjoying the comfort that came with first-class travel. It was the kind of flight where everyone expected silence, privacy, and status. Then suddenly, a loud, irritated voice shattered the calm. "Unbelievable," a man scoffed loudly. "People who don't belong here somehow always sneak in." A few passengers looked up, confused. Others shifted uncomfortably in their seats. The comment came from a sharply dressed businessman sitting near the aisle. He wore a tailored suit, a luxury watch, and an expression filled with entitlement. His eyes were locked on the man seated quietly across from him. That man wore a simple black hoodie, worn-out sneakers, and a pair of headphones. He wasn't drinking champagne. He wasn't talking loudly. He wasn't even looking around. He was simply gazing out the window, calm and relaxed, like any ordinary traveler. That man was Keanu Reeves. At first, most passengers didn't recognize him. There were no bodyguards, no designer clothes, no attention-seeking behavior. Just a peaceful presence and a quiet smile. But the businessman noticed, and clearly didn't like what he saw. He leaned slightly toward a nearby flight attendant and spoke again, this time louder than necessary. "Isn't first class supposed to be exclusive?" he said. "Because this doesn't look like someone who paid for it." The flight attendant froze, unsure how to respond. Several passengers exchanged glances. One woman frowned. A man near the window whispered, "Is he serious?" Keanu slowly removed his headphones. He had heard everything. Instead of showing anger or embarrassment, he smiled gently and spoke in a calm voice. "I'm sorry if my presence is disturbing anyone." His kindness only fueled the businessman's ego. "Well, that's a first," the man laughed mockingly. "Guess money really can buy anything these days, even a seat you don't belong in." The air in the cabin felt heavy now. The luxury no longer felt comfortable. Some passengers looked away, while others stared in disbelief. Keanu didn't argue. He didn't explain who he was. He didn't raise his voice. He simply nodded, put his headphones back on, and returned his gaze to the clouds outside the window. What the businessman didn't realize was that true confidence doesn't need to prove itself, and true class doesn't announce itself. As the plane continued its journey, the businessman sat back proudly, believing he had made his point. Meanwhile, Keanu remained calm, unbothered, and dignified, as if the insult never mattered at all. Little did anyone in first class know, this moment was only the beginning. Because sometimes, the quietest person in the room carries the loudest truth, and the most powerful lesson often comes when you least expect it. As the plane began taxiing toward the runway, the tension in first class slowly returned, until one man decided to stir it again. The businessman leaned forward in his seat, turning slightly toward a nearby flight attendant. He didn't lower his voice. In fact, he made sure others could hear. "Isn't first class supposed to be exclusive?" he said with a smirk. "Because this looks like economy behavior to me." The flight attendant froze. Her polite smile faded as she glanced nervously between the businessman and the quiet passenger he was pointing toward. She had been trained to handle difficult customers, but this felt different. This felt personal. Before she could respond, a soft movement caught everyone's attention. Keanu Reeves slowly removed his headphones. He had heard every word. The cabin seemed to grow quieter as passengers watched closely, expecting anger, embarrassment, or maybe a sharp comeback. But that wasn't what happened. Keanu turned slightly, his expression calm and gentle. He smiled politely and spoke in a soft, respectful tone. "I'm sorry if I've caused any inconvenience," he said. For a brief moment, silence hung in the air. Then the businessman laughed. It wasn't a friendly laugh. It was loud, dismissive, and filled with arrogance. "Wow," he said sarcastically. "Didn't know they let charity cases up here now." A ripple of discomfort moved through the cabin. One passenger shook his head slowly. Another woman tightened her grip on her armrest. A man near the window leaned toward his companion and whispered, "Does he know who that is?" The flight attendant looked shocked. Her face flushed with embarrassment, not for Keanu, but for the man making a scene. Keanu didn't react. He didn't defend himself. He didn't reveal his identity. He didn't raise his voice. Instead, he nodded slightly, as if acknowledging a comment that didn't deserve an answer. He calmly placed his headphones back over his ears, closed his eyes, and leaned into his seat. The message was clear. He refused to sink to that level. The businessman, satisfied with himself, leaned back smugly, believing he had won some invisible argument. To him, silence meant defeat. But to those watching closely, silence meant strength. The cabin now felt heavier than before. The luxury, the comfort, the expensive surroundings, none of it mattered anymore. What mattered was character. And in that moment, it was obvious who had it. What no one in first class realized was that this exchange hadn't gone unnoticed. The flight attendant, still shaken, quietly made her way toward the cockpit. Her steps were measured, professional, but her expression carried concern. Within moments, the captain would know exactly what had happened. And soon, everyone else would too. Because sometimes, when someone tries to humiliate another person, the truth doesn't shout back. It waits. And when it finally speaks, it speaks louder than any insult ever could. Up front, inside the quiet cockpit, the captain had already finished reviewing the passenger list. Most names passed by without a second thought, but one name made him pause. Keanu Reeves. The captain leaned back slightly in his seat, a faint smile crossing his face. This wasn't just the name of a famous actor. To the airline, and to many in the aviation world, Keanu Reeves was known for something far more meaningful than movies. Over the years, he had quietly supported aviation scholarships for young pilots who couldn't afford training. He had donated to emergency relief funds for flight crews during difficult times. Once, during a massive weather delay, he had personally paid for hotel accommodations and meals for stranded passengers, without asking for credit, publicity, or even a thank you. No press releases. No headlines. Just quiet generosity. The captain remembered him clearly. That was why, when a flight attendant carefully entered the cockpit and explained what had happened in first class, the captain's expression changed. She spoke professionally, but her discomfort was obvious. She described the businessman, the insults, and the way one passenger had been targeted simply for not looking like he belonged. The captain listened without interrupting. When she finished, the cockpit fell silent. He looked once more at the passenger list, then out through the windshield at the long runway ahead. For a brief moment, he considered his response. Then he made his decision. He reached forward and gently pressed the intercom button. At the same time, the cabin lights dimmed slightly, a subtle change, but enough to signal that something important was about to happen. The familiar announcement tone echoed through the aircraft, cutting through quiet conversations and uneasy thoughts. Every voice stopped. Every movement paused. Passengers looked up from their phones. Drinks were set down. Even the businessman straightened in his seat. Then came the captain's calm, steady voice. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, "this is your captain speaking." The words carried authority, but also warmth. The silence inside the cabin was absolute now. No clinking glasses. No whispers. Just attention. The captain continued, "Before we take off today, I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge a very special individual traveling with us." Several passengers exchanged curious glances. Keanu, still wearing his headphones, slowly opened his eyes. Up front, the captain took a measured breath. He wasn't doing this for drama. He wasn't doing this for recognition. He was doing it because respect matters. And sometimes, the right thing to do is to speak, especially when kindness has been mistaken for weakness. The businessman felt a strange tightening in his chest. He didn't know why, but something told him this announcement wasn't routine. As the captain prepared to continue, the entire plane waited. Unaware that in just a few seconds, the truth would shift the balance of power in the cabin. And the lesson about what real class looks like would land harder than any turbulence ever could. "I'd like to personally welcome a very special passenger on board today," the pilot continued. The words echoed through the cabin, calm yet powerful. At that moment, Keanu Reeves slowly opened his eyes. He wasn't expecting anything. He thought it was just another routine announcement. Across the aisle, the businessman straightened in his seat. His confident posture stiffened, as if something inside him sensed a sudden shift. Then the captain spoke again. "Mr. Keanu Reeves is flying with us today," he said clearly. A wave of confusion passed through first class. Heads turned. Eyebrows lifted. A few passengers leaned forward, trying to see the man in the black hoodie more clearly. The captain continued, his voice steady and sincere. "Not just as a guest, but as someone who has supported this airline, our crew, and countless others through acts of kindness that never made headlines." The cabin froze. People began connecting the dots. The quiet man. The simple clothes. The calm behavior. A ripple of surprise moved through the passengers like electricity. Some gasped softly. Others exchanged shocked looks. One woman covered her mouth. Another passenger whispered, "That's him?" The pilot wasn't finished. "We're honored to have him with us today," the captain said, "and on behalf of the entire crew, thank you, sir." Then the announcement ended. For a brief moment, there was silence. Not the awkward kind, but the heavy kind. The kind that follows truth. And then it happened. Applause. At first, it was hesitant. A few claps here and there. Then more joined in. Soon, the entire first-class cabin was filled with the sound of appreciation. Some passengers turned fully in their seats to look at Keanu. A few stood up. Others nodded with genuine respect. Even people seated farther back leaned into the aisle, trying to catch a glimpse. Keanu looked overwhelmed. His face flushed slightly. He shook his head gently, as if to say, "This isn't necessary." He gave a small, humble wave and quietly mouthed the words, "Thank you." There was no pride in his eyes, no satisfaction. Only humility. Meanwhile, the businessman sat frozen. The color drained from his face. His confident expression collapsed into disbelief. The same man he had mocked minutes earlier was now being honored by the captain himself. He didn't clap. He couldn't. His hands rested stiffly on his lap as he stared straight ahead, suddenly finding the ice in his glass far more interesting than the people around him. The luxury he had once taken pride in now felt suffocating. For the rest of the flight, he kept his eyes down. No comments. No laughter. No confidence, just silence. The plane continued its journey through the clouds, but something had changed inside that cabin. Status had lost its meaning. Appearances had been exposed. And respect had found its rightful place. Without saying a single harsh word, Keanu Reeves had delivered a lesson more powerful than any argument. A lesson that true class doesn't demand attention. It earns it. And everyone on that flight would remember that moment long after they landed. As the plane cruised smoothly above the clouds, something in first class had completely changed. The tension was gone, The arrogance had faded, and in its place was a quiet sense of respect. Passengers no longer focused on luxury or status. Instead, one by one, they approached Keanu Reeves, not loudly, not dramatically, but gently. A middle-aged man leaned closer and said, "Thank you for being you." A woman smiled and added, "You remind people what kindness looks like." They didn't thank him for being famous. They didn't mention movies or awards. They thanked him for being humble. Keanu responded to everyone the same way: soft smile, kind words, genuine attention. He asked about families, listened carefully, and treated every person as if they mattered just as much as anyone else in the cabin. He even stood up to thank the flight attendants personally. Not once, but multiple times. He called them by name. He shook hands. He made eye contact. The crew wasn't serving a celebrity. They were being respected by a human being. The businessman watched all of this from his seat. Earlier, he had felt powerful, confident, superior. Now, he felt small. Not because anyone insulted him, but because he finally understood the difference between status and character. The rest of the flight passed quietly. No more comments. No more judgment. Only reflection. When the plane finally landed and taxied toward the gate, passengers stood and gathered their belongings. Keanu waited patiently, letting others exit first. He was among the last to stand up. As he reached into the overhead bin, a hesitant voice broke the silence behind him. I didn't know," the businessman muttered. Keanu turned slowly. The man couldn't meet his eyes. His voice was low, filled with regret rather than pride. "I judged you," he continued. "I shouldn't have." Keanu looked at him calmly. No anger. No satisfaction. No lecture. Just understanding. "That's okay," Keanu said gently. "Most of the best things about people aren't obvious." The words landed softly, but they carried weight. The businessman nodded, swallowing hard. It was the kind of lesson that didn't need more explanation. Keanu smiled one last time and walked down the aisle, disappearing into the crowd at the airport. No cameras followed him. No reporters waited. No dramatic moment was captured. Just dignity. And for everyone who witnessed that flight, it became more than just a journey from one place to another. It became a reminder. A reminder that true class isn't about designer clothes, expensive seats, or loud confidence. True class is quiet. True class is respectful. True class shows itself when no one is watching, or when someone thinks they don't matter. That day, at 35,000 feet, one man tried to measure worth by appearances, and another showed everyone what real worth looks like, without ever raising his voice.